welcome to today's webcast. So you want to build a program. And again, continue to chat and let us know where you're from. Welcome wherever you are in the world. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Mark Shambley. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at the World Federation of Youth Clubs. And we're super excited to be part of this conversation with you guys today on a really important topic around program design and program development and implementation. So with our typical sort of webcast format, we have some standard things we're going to kind of go over. And then we're going to get right to our guest speaker. So with that, make sure my slides are moving here. There we go. So this session is being recorded and it will be available to you on the World Federation of Youth Clubs website. That is WFYC.org. And that is, of course, our newly designed website, and where you'll have all of the webcast sessions available. In addition, you'll see a couple of webcasts that are coming up in April and also later on in the year. So with that, quick housekeeping. Well, here's the agenda. We'll do some housekeeping, some opening remarks from me, introduction of our guest speaker, Sara. Then we'll have a presentation conversation format, a little bit different than sort of a moderated discussion or facilitated discussion than we've had in the past. Always trying new things here at the World Federation of Youth Clubs. And then we're going to open things up for hopefully what will be a robust Q&A session, and then we'll close things out. So with that, on the housekeeping front, everyone, please continue to have your lines muted until the Q&A. If you are comfortable with raising your hand and speaking when you have a question, that's fine. You also could use the chat function to submit your questions. And then in terms of viewing experience, we recommend the side-by-side speaker viewer. If you go up to the upper right-hand corner of Zoom and then click view, and then the speaker view, you'll see either speaker view or side-by-side speaker view available to get the right kind of experience where we could see you and you can also see the speaker and the slides. So that's our suggestion for the right format for Zoom. But please, I also encourage you, we love seeing your faces as well as hearing your voices and also seeing your questions in chat, but there's nothing like seeing your faces. So if you have the ability, please go ahead and allow your videos to be turned on. So with that, our standard approach here is to always remind attendees who we are and what we do. And so at the World Federation of Youth Clubs, your organization, our goal, our mission is to develop and enhance and advance organizations, your organizations, to provide a safe place for young people. And our purpose is to do this all around the world, to create safe and nurturing spaces for young people. So our goal is to support you, and you in turn support young people. Our value proposition continues to be centered around three areas: guide and consult, network and learn, and promote and amplify. We will always remain a high-touch organization that's built into the DNA of the World Federation of Youth Clubs. So even as we expand our offerings beyond just the consultation work that we're known for into special programming and training, and of course, under the area of networking and learning, our international conference, which many of you had the opportunity to attend, continue to build our Collaborators for Good network. We continue to add new collaborators each and every month. And then our connection point on a monthly basis around Webcast, that will continue to build over time. So regardless of all the things we're doing to grow the organization and our reach, to make sure that we're transferring knowledge to you, we're going to remain a high-touch organization that's attentive to your needs. As it relates to resources, I mentioned our collaborator network. We added World Lacrosse and a few other collaborators in the recent weeks. So we're really excited about building out that network and tapping into the resources that they provide to support you. The one-on-one consultation, the personalized support you get from Glenn and Jose will continue. But we also know that there's opportunities for more engaged learning virtually. So Webcast and also the online community. We're moving into our phase 2 of our website development, which we launched at the annual conference this past month. And you'll see that online community coming live in probably the next 2 or 3 months. And then of course, here we are with another exciting webcast. So with that, we just want to do a quick chat check-in, okay? So today's chat check-in is around what is your favorite drink, okay? What is your favorite drink? So you guys, let me see that chat starting to explode. Whatever that drink, if it's an evening drink, a morning drink, an afternoon drink, whatever it is. I know mine is bourbon, okay? That is my favorite drink. So, and hopefully later this evening, I will be participating in my favorite drink. So let us know what your favorite drink is. Let's check out what's going on in the chat. Dawn, do you have a few of them that you want to sort of read out? Do we have some?
I mean, there's some good votes for coffee right now, for sure. Hot chocolate, water, tea. I'll vote for bourbon.
Oh, okay. All right.
Also guayaba juice.
Guayaba juice. There's
lemonade.
Well, apparently you guys know where my mind is at with my bourbon recommendation, so I'm going to keep it.
Sandia, okay.
So, all right. So with that, let's get things opened up and let's get our guest speaker here, so you have an opportunity to hear from her. So as I mentioned earlier, this presentation, this format is kind of a little different. So we have a presentation from Sara Dolinger, who I'm going to introduce in just a second. And then there'll be opportunities to engage with Sara, and then we'll sort of open things up for a conversation. There are kind of two main threads for today's discussion, and that's one, how to use a systematic approach to design and implement a program, right? So that's one. And then second, how do you take this design thinking approach to better implement programmatic outcomes or to pursue programmatic outcomes with youth? So it's really kind of twofold. It's again the design and implementation, but then ultimately, how do you think about the results that you're looking for from an outcome perspective? So just keep those two things in mind. So with that, I want to introduce Sara Dolinger. She is an international development professional with experience in implementing and designing, well, I should say successfully designing and implementing curriculum-based programs all around the world. She has lived in Honduras, she has lived in Guatemala and Rwanda. And what's interesting about Sara's background is the fact that she has been on the ground. You have some folks who are researchers who don't have real on-the-ground experience. We're thrilled to bring someone to you who's not only thoroughly studied the area around program design and implementation, but she's done that sort of in the lab, in the field, all around the world. So Sara's going to have a little time in her presentation to talk a little bit more about her background. So I don't want to step on her presentation, and you guys are probably tired of hearing from me. So with that, I'm going to introduce Sara Dolinger. Sara?
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much. As Mark said, I'm an international development professional who, for the last 6-7 years, have been working in multiple countries doing program design, program redesign, implementation, and really working with programs to strengthen the quality of the programmatic offerings so that the programs can hit their results and their goals. So that's a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm what I'm really excited about is I'm going to introduce to everyone my favorite tool for doing so. It's not everyone's favorite tool, I admit this, but we're going to start talking about that. So thank you for having me. And por los que viven en Sur y South or Central America, yo también hablo español. Si quieres preguntarme en español, no preocupes, está bien. Todo bien. Entiendo, puedo responder, ningún problema, okay? But I will be giving the presentation in English. What I just said was for those in Central and South America. If you want to speak to me in Spanish or ask me a question in Spanish, that is fine. I work in English and Spanish all day. But the majority of this presentation will be in English. If you have a question though, please, if it's in, you can write your question in Spanish, I will read it, that's fine. But okay. So Mark, can we move forward?
You got it.
Okay. So what we're going to be talking about today is a log frame. A log frame is something that maybe some of you haven't heard of, but it is one of my favorite tools for designing programs because it's a simplified version of putting everything on paper of what are your goals, what are your activities, what do you expect the outcomes to be, what are the risks, and how are you going to evaluate. And so it's a complex tool in certain ways, but it's also a tool that is extremely useful for so many people in so many different ways. And so that's why I'm excited to share how to create a log frame and what it looks like so that you all can really use this to structure and create programs that are going to have impact. All right, so the next slide, please. So for today's session, we have a couple of different parts. I'm going to start with the introduction. We're going to start off with the actual to the log frame, what it is, all its components, go through the nitty gritty. Then we're going to talk about how a log frame can be connected to M&E, so monitoring and evaluation systems. And then I'll give you a couple of personal stories of how I've used or created log frames in the field in different contexts. And then we'll get into the question and answer section. So if there's no questions as of yet, we'll get moving. So as Mark said, my name is Sara Dolinger. I'm originally from the US, but have spent the last, 5-6 years abroad, bouncing around between different countries. After I got my master's, I went to Rwanda and worked there creating a youth entrepreneurship and employment curriculum for out-of-school youth, which was really amazing experience for me because it really was a basis in life skills. So the habilidades blandas in Spanish, but the ability for youth to really create skills is really what has become my calling and what I really work on all of those programs. And it's something I really enjoy because for me, I am the most excited and energized when I get to have impact. So really seeing how my work can have impact. And one of the great things with log frames is that you can design impact. And that's something that I think is going to be really important for all of these clubs. So next slide. So let's just jump right in. What is a log frame? I'm betting some of you have never heard this term. Log frame is the colloquial term. The official term is logical framework model. So a logical framework model is just that. It is a framework that outlines all of your activities, what the outcomes are, what the outputs, the outcomes, and then the goals. And then on top of that, your risks, your assumptions, and everything like that. So it is a complicated system, but really what it is a spreadsheet that outlines your goals, your activities, and your expected results, and how you're going to get there. So I know that all of you are doing great work in the field. There's a lot of things to be done every day, and you're doing your best. But what the good thing about a log frame is you can put all that in and see, oh, we need to put more energy in this area because we're not hitting this target. We're not hitting this goal. So we need to reassess, readjust, because if anything that 2020 has taught us, it's important to be flexible and readjust. And that's what a log frame can do for a lot of us. So they can be created at any time, at the beginning of a program or even during, because it's just a document that helps you organize all of your activities to meet your goals. Because I know we have limited resources, so we need to be effective with our time and our energy, and especially financial resources. We need to be efficient with those, and so that's why a log frame can be really, really helpful. So it's essentially the overview of the project's goals and the activities, but really it connects with all the expected results, which is really great. Okay, let's see. Yeah, and so the purpose of the log frame is to make sure everything's connected. So here's our example. I took this example from an article from The Guardian, so that's going to be connected at the end if you want to read the full article. But I'm using this example because it's for a school reading program. So I thought that it was very applicable to a lot of the work that you all do. And so you can see that the goal is a 10% increase in the number of 5th to 6th grade primary students continuing on to high school within 3 years, which is a great goal. But to break that down, you need to do a lot of different things. So what they really want the outcome to be is improve reading proficiency. How do they do that? You go through the outputs and the activities. And so we're going to talk about all of these different components. So starting on the vertical axis, you have the goal. That's what you want to accomplish. The outcome, all of these are from a bottom up, or a top down or a bottom up perspective. So the goal is the big overarching umbrella. The outcome is the big puzzle piece that you need to fit your goal. The outputs are the results of your activities. So the difference between outputs and outcomes is usually very difficult to differentiate, but they are different in that an outcome is also sometimes called the objective or the purpose. So what is the purpose of all of these outputs? And the outputs are the results of the activities. So the results of the activities then add to the objective or the purpose, which then create alignment with the goal, if that makes sense. So your activities is what you do on a day-to-day basis. The outputs are the results of those activities. The outcomes are the results of the outputs, and the outcomes then mean you're accomplishing your goal. Okay? And so switching over to the horizontal axis, the summary is, I hope, self-explanatory. It's the summary. It's saying what you're doing. The indicators. Indicator means how do you know that it was accomplished? You can be a qualitative or a quantitative measure, meaning it can be numbers based or visual interaction based. So for this one, it's quantitative in that it's a percentage. So percentage of 5th grade students continuing on to high school. That's how you'll know that you increase the number of students going by a change in percentage. That could also be if you're doing something more broad or open. For example, if you want to change community opinion, how you measure a change of community opinion might be through increased actions that you're looking to see or conversations with community members, and then you can look into different quantitative measures. But usually for log frames, we try to stick to qualitative, so numbers-based percentages, just because it is easier and faster to verify. And then the means of verification, really that's asking how will you see the difference? You're going to compare rates from the beginning till the end, okay? That's one way of verification. You're going to verify attendance records, okay? So we know that we reached 500 students because 500 students showed up to the camp. How can we verify that? We looked at the attendance record. Risks and assumptions. This section is probably the most important and the usually most left off of most log frames. So it's the column all the way to the right. So the risks and the assumptions are extremely important because you need to write out and think about how are you going to mitigate or lessen the response of something that could disrupt your activity or the results of your activity? For example, if you live in an area that's prone to flooding or storms, you may say that staff are trained in emergency procedures, or the building was improved, or things like that, so that if something happens, which it always does, you know, life is life, things happen, we need to be able to think about, okay, how can we mitigate this before it happens? So when life does happen, you already have thought about it, you already kind of have a plan. For example, I live in Guatemala. We have volcanic eruptions. We're having one right now. And a couple of schools in the region, you know, if this was not COVID times, would be closed. How would you work with that? Okay, so we have a contingency plan already thought of, because when we created the log frame, we thought, oh, you know, sometimes during rainy season this happens, or sometimes the volcano erupts. We have to be able to be flexible in how to adjust. So the risk and the assumptions are extremely, extremely important. And I'll go through that when we talk about validation of the log frame. So Mark, can you go to the next slide, please? So this is called verifying the log frame. So you can write out everything, put it in the log frame template, and then how do you know if you did it right? Because you know, this might be your first time doing a log frame. They're not the easiest thing to do the first time, trust me. When I first learned to do them, I thought they were, you know, an evil tool, but now I'm like, ooh, they're very helpful. So what you start with is you go to your activity, which is on the left, bottom left circle. So they're going to say run 5 summer reading camps, each with a capacity for 100 5th grade to 6th grade students. So if that happens, and you go over to your risk and assumption category, the parents of low income children or with low reading proficiencies are willing to send them, because that's a risk. You can have summer camps, but the risk is maybe the parents don't want to send them. Maybe the parents don't have transportation. Maybe there's, you know, so many other risks. But okay, if you mitigate those risks and the kids want to come and the parents are going to send them, then you switch back up to your outputs. If you run 5 camps with 100 kids each, you have 500 5th to 6th grade students with improved reading proficiency. That's good. That's what you want. So then you go back to the risks and assumptions for the outputs. Okay, if the children do apply what they learned in the summer camp, then you get the outcome, which is improved reading proficiency in grades 5 to 6 by 20% in 3 years. So by having the camps and the parents want to send them, you have a group of kids that has improved reading. What that means is that they then apply that at school. So you can go back and forth between the left column of the project summary and the risk assumptions from the bottom up. And you can say, if this happens, if this and this, these risks are mitigated, then we will get this. And you can do that all the way up. And that's what you need to do to verify it, to make sure that your logic is sound. Again, this is a log frame, a logical framework model. So you need to have logic. So it doesn't make sense, for example, if you say we're going to hit 500 kids, if you're having 2 camps at 30 kids each. That's not going to work. And that's why verifying is really important, going back through and making sure you hit everything. Okay, next slide, please. So I was showing you what I call a vertical model. So the goal, outcome, outputs, activities is on the vertical axis. You can also do it in a horizontal format. So a log frame is the document for your organization. You need to organize it how you find most beneficial. For me, most of the log frames that I create is in a horizontal format. So it goes goal, outcome, outputs, activities, which is the example that you see on the slide currently. I do that this way because my specialty is life skills education for youth, and I find it very helpful to have the activities on a vertical axis, so I can then connect with capacities, M&E, a little bit easier and have those vertically. For me, that visual is easier to understand because essentially a log frame should look like a funnel. All of your activities are going towards this goal. And for some people, it makes more sense in their minds to have it vertical, and for some people, it's better horizontal. They're both the same as long as you have the same information. It doesn't matter which format you use. So I'm just giving this as an example because there is no right or wrong way to make a log frame. It's what works for your organization. Okay, next slide, please. So I touched on this a little bit previously when I was talking about the indicators. Those are your numbers, your qualitative or quantitative changes to percentages. So M&E and log frames, they go together like peanut butter and jelly. It is so wonderful when you see a log frame because you know that if you have a log frame, you've already pre-thought about M&E, even if you've never said the words M&E out loud ever. Why? Because of indicators. So we want for the log frame, for the components to be filled out in a SMART format, which means specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So for example, instead of saying we want to improve in 6th grade reading, it's like, okay, we want to improve 10% of 5th to 6th grade reading within 3 years is a more SMART goal because you have numbers. You can say just improvement is not SMART. You need it to be specific. And so by adding a percentage, by adding some time, you make it very measurable and time bound, which makes it a more clear goal, which is for the log frame is what you want. You want things to be clear because it's not just for the organization. Log frames can be shared with stakeholders, and I will go into that as a specific example from my own personal experience in a bit. But M&E, I think for everyone, is something that we all have to do. Sometimes it's difficult, but with a log frame, it's already somewhat done and organized. You understand, okay, if this is our goal of preparing young women to enter the workforce, for example, you need to be able to measure specific things. Okay, how many young women are working? How many are continuing their studies? How many are participating in programs? Those kind of numbers are good to know, not just for you to see what areas are working in your programs, but also to share with other stakeholders and funders. That's the kind of information that a lot of funders are looking for. Can you prove to me that your program is making a difference, making an impact? And so by having these types of documents on hand, you can share them with people and say, hey, we've already thought about this. We're ready, we're prepared, we can do this when asking for more money or a bigger grant. So that's why I really think that log frames are beneficial, because M&E is something that I know all organizations, large and small, struggle with. So next slide, please. So here's another example of verification, but from an M&E standpoint. So if you look at the activity 2, you distribute 60 reading at home kits to parents and children. Okay, if you distribute only 60 kits, you're not going to have 500 parents at home helping their children read. Why? Because you only distributed 60. So if you don't do 60 times 9, you don't do this like 9 times, you're not going to hit your number of 50. So you can already see you're not going to hit your goal because your activities aren't aligning. And so this for M&E, you can say, okay, if we're looking for a 50% increase over 3 years, which is, I'm going to be honest, a very high target for most organizations, you really have to be very specific and very thoughtful about your activities. How many people you're hitting? What is the frequency? So this helps us in M&E for a programmatic side to know, okay, if our limit, let's say during a summer of, let's say 2 months, you have 4 camps That's one every 2 weeks. Is your staff actually able to prepare all the resources? Do they have the time, the energy, the logistical abilities to do that? If not, you need to adjust your outcomes, your outputs, your goals to fit what is your programmatic availability. So, if you can only print, 40 packets a day, and you're in May and by June you want to have 500, you have to think about what is our time component? So these are all aspects that a log frame can help you flush out. Because really, it's a whole process of thinking about what are we doing and how does it connect to what we're trying to accomplish. If anything, that's the one simple thing about a log frame. Connect what you do with what you want to accomplish. That's all you're doing. And you're putting it into one document that you can share with others. And I think that's very important. So next slide, please. So I'll go into a little bit of my experience with log frames. So I was previously with World Vision Rwanda. And while I was there, I was working on a youth program for entrepreneurship and employment. But while I was there, the entire national office had a strategic objective change. So in education, we went from focusing on construction of schools to improving quality of schools. So as you can imagine, that changed the activities drastically. So it went from building, like say, oh, we built so many schools and being very easy to check that off, to how many teachers did we train? How many packets did we hand out? How many materials did we look over and improve? It's a very different change. And so we ended up renting a conference room and projecting on a giant wall the log frame for education and going through it with the life skills team, with the finance team, with pretty much every team. And we really looked through and found, okay, these are our issues. We have to have such a mind shift. And I think for a lot of us, COVID made us have one of those because our activities had to be so drastically shifted in how we operate in a lot of countries. So I think this is why it's also very timely that we're talking about log frames, because for a lot of us, our programs have shifted. What we normally did in 2019 and before sometimes is not viable right now. But by redoing a log frame or creating a log frame, you can see, okay, this is where we need to adjust. And then another example of this, because I know a lot of you are probably in your heads going, but I already have a program running. So EFTC is the abbreviation for a school that I worked for, Education for the Children here in Guatemala. And I came in and they've been around for 15-ish years, 15 to 20. And I came in and I was the head of education for the entire school. So I came in, was looking at the directors of the básico and the primaria and the pre-primaria, and I was like, okay. And one day I invited all of the directors for a meeting and handed each of them a pack of Post-its and said, write down everything you do every day, what you're supposed to do every week and every month. And we just threw them all up on a whiteboard. And then I started creating groupings. It's like, okay, this is our logistical grouping. This is our teacher training grouping. This is our emotional support grouping. Okay, how does these activities and these groupings align with our goals? And so it was a very interesting activity because we found that about an hour a day was spent taking attendance. Attendance is, yes, a very necessary aspect of running a school or any type of education program. But in terms of goals, counting attendance does not help you improve a child's education, have a better trained teacher, or have a community within your school, which were the 3 goals at EFTC that we were really focusing on. It was a logistical thing that had to be done, just like turning in our lessons plans to the Ministerio de Educación, the Ministry of Education. We had to do it, but it didn't really help us be a better school, which is what we wanted. So we looked at, it's like, okay, what are the systems we can put in place to reduce the time of this activity so that we can better respond to the needs of the teachers, of the students, of the community. So that's what's important. And you can really think about, for a log frame, we can go through and say, okay, what are our goals? And if our activities aren't aligning, there's no way we're going to hit our goals. Essentially, it was doing the M&E verification with the activities going, but you spend, 20% of your day responding to emails. Well, then you can't expect, to have such impact. And that's what I think a log frame for an entire organization is really important. So, Mark, next slide, please. So here's the thing. I know that I just threw a lot of information at you very quickly. And so I'm going to respond to a lot of the frequently asked questions when it comes to log frames. Just to get the ball rolling, so when we get to the question and answer section, you can be asked more specific questions about your organization. So we're going to start here. So where to start? It's like, okay, where to start? I need to make a log frame. What do I do? Okay. For me, what's really helpful is you can either go, there's two ways. You start from the top up and go down, or you start from the bottom and go up. So you either start with, what are your goals? Okay, then are our outcomes? What do we need to happen to achieve our goals? And then from our outcomes, what are our outputs? What do we need our activities to do to make our goals achievable? Or you can go from the bottom, which is the activities. This is what we do. This is what we hope that the impact of our activities is. Oh, from here, our outputs, we want this to be our outcomes, and therefore this aligns to our goals. So it depends on your organization. You can go from top down or bottom up, or you could do a bit of both and see what works. Also, who should you be involving to create a log frame? In my experience, you need a variety of people, but you also don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, as they say. It may be difficult if you have everyone present. Why? Because that's a lot of opinions. So what I've done before is, for education for the children, we created the log frame as the team of directors, the 5 directors, and then picked a team, a small sample of about 10 teachers, and they looked over it. And they caught, oh, did you think about this? Did you think about this? And it's like, okay. Then we went back and revised it and then shared it with the whole teaching staff. So it was a whole process. But honestly, if we had been in a room with 30 some teachers plus the directors, that process would have taken a lot longer. But it's also beneficial to have people. So let's say you have different areas that you work in. If you provide therapy or psycho-emotional support, you probably want someone from that team that, because it is interrelated, involved in the process, if that makes sense. So you want a variety so you can get the true picture, but you probably don't want everyone. But that's not saying everyone shouldn't see this document, okay? So how often should we update or adjust our log frame? That is depending on the organization. Rule of thumb, about every 2 years. You should do a really deep revision and say, okay, are we still hitting this? Most of the time, because the goals are set for 2 to 3 years out. But every year you should be going through this document with your executive team and going, okay, did anything change? Between 2019 and 2020, the answer would be a very drastic yes. A lot of things changed, so we can adjust. This document is not written in stone. It's a living document. It changes with the organization, and that's what's very important. So that's very important. Who uses this document? It should be something that is shared broadly once you have it in certain circumstances. For example, if you're running a school, you maybe don't want to send this document to parents because it would be a little complicated to explain. But a lot of funders and grant making organizations ask for log frames as part of the grant process. So if you already have one available and you decide to go for a grant for the first time, because when first time, a couple times you go for grants, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of documentation. But if you already have parts of it done, it's such a simpler process. And I think that's really important. But it is something that should be definitely shared with and talked about within an executive management team. So if you have, finance should know what the log frame looks like. Why? Because M&E aspects are required for finance. So if we're going to print 500 packets, that means we need a printer that can do that. Okay. So those kind of things need to be all interrelated. So anyone in a management position should have this document, maybe not for daily reference. This isn't a daily reference document. This is something for more of the strategic plan. For when you're doing this for 5 years, you're like, okay, but really it's to keep an eye on the goals. So you don't get stuck in the weeds, as we say in English, about the daily, it's like, oh, I had a problem with this kid, or this shipment didn't arrive in time. Okay, but really thinking, but you're making an impact, and that's what needs to be focused on. And I think it can create a lot of buy-in with a lot of different stakeholders. So at Education for the Children, when we shared it with the teachers, one of the comments with the teachers was, wow, you guys are actually valuing the work that we're doing. I was like, yeah, you're the ones actually implementing the programs. We recognize that you're doing 90% of the work. We're just doing the administration. But see how your actions, all of these little things that you think are just tasks, are really impacting the goal. So I think that it can be something that you do for buy-in as well. And probably the most important question that a lot of people are asking, is it too late to create a log frame if we're already implementing? No, it might actually be the best time because it makes you flexible. You can realize, oh, this activity isn't aligned to an outcome. All right, do we need to is this activity so crucial that we think we need to create a new goal that aligns for this? Or maybe do we need to shift our focus? Because I think the worst things that some organizations can do is start on day one with a plan and stick to it for 3 years. You need to be adaptable. So if you've already been implementing, you have a youth program that you've been running for 5, 6 years, you can create a log frame and realize, oh, we need to make these changes. Why? Because these are our goals. If we really want to hit them and we want to improve the community, our students' lives, which is, the impact that we're all looking to have, we have to make sure that all of our activities are aligned. Because, it doesn't matter if you do the same thing over and over and over again if it's not getting impact. So it's like, okay, let us shift. And so with a log frame, again, it's a different tool. It's one that probably a lot of smaller organizations have not heard of, but it is very helpful. For me, especially because I can see how everything relates to the big picture. And I think for especially smaller organizations, sometimes that's not very explicit. That's not very clear. And that can be a very motivating factor for many, seeing how all of the little things create the big output. So, okay. And next slide, please. So, what questions do you have for me? You could put them in the chat.
So Sarah.
Yes, Mark. Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So while our attendees are thinking about their great questions to ask, and thank you very much for your remarks and presentation. This has been very informative for me. The question I have is around what to what extent should you be implementing or thinking about developing a log frame for your programs? Is it applicable for all programs, or should it be limited to programs where the organization is making substantial investments in that program or tied to specific funding? I'm just trying to get a sense of this, the amount of rigor in organizations, especially those organizations that aren't large institutions like World Vision, that might be smaller. How much time do you have to dedicate to going through this exercise?
Well, I think it depends on the organization. For example, World Vision Rwanda was 24 local offices plus the national office, and of course millions of dollars. So their log frame was extensive.
Right.
It was something like 250 cells deep. And that's going from a horizontal side. It was a very large document. For education for the children, we were a school of 400 kids in one local community, and we still created a log frame. And that was, we had 3 major goals and I think 25 activities, 25 activities. And so it depends on, again, your scope. What does your finance look like? What does your implementation look like? I think it can be beneficial to any organization, no matter the size. But your size will depend on how much energy and how much time you need to invest in creating this document. So, for example, a larger organization is going to require more time because there's more inputs. You need to talk with different organizations or different parts of the organization. But for a small organization, it's very simple because it doesn't need to be this drastic, huge document. It can just be a 1-pager. So for example, the reading program, I have it printed out here so I can have it in front of me. This was their log frame. It's on 1 sheet of paper.
Okay.
Just 1. So it's not that complex of a document. You can add different things to it. So for example, when I've done curriculum redesigns, I've actually gone down to the activity level and then gone farther. You can keep going. I gave you a very simplified programmatic log frame. For a curriculum, we go a lot deeper and our documents get a lot longer.
Okay.
But for any size organization, I think this could be helpful.
And did I hear you, Sarah, say that you can start with a couple of ways? You can start from the bottom up or from the top down, meaning you can start with thinking about your outcomes that you want to achieve and what are the activities you need to put in place that drive the certain outputs that lead to the certain outcomes. Or you can say, okay, well, these are the activities, and then logically build up from there that series or that sequence of actions. When you're looking at evaluating an existing program or something like that, is there, it seems to me that it makes more sense to be thinking about, oh, well, these are the outcomes that we're looking for. Maybe we start with the outcomes and then build backwards. I'm just curious in terms of the logic behind, ways in which you use the model for different purposes and trying to make decisions for your organization.
For me, if you already have a program, you should have your goals. Like we want to achieve this, this, and this. And then, you should look into your outcomes. And then you can very easily connect from your activities, and then see, okay, we have this activity that doesn't connect to any outcome. Why are we doing this? Is this a necessity? Or is this actually something that we should look into the logic of why we do this? Is this contributing to a different goal, maybe in a different department or in a different area? Okay, maybe we need to be more expressive, like expand our goals to include this aspect. You can also just start with your activities. because, you know, from your activities, you should be able to make a connection of every activity to an output, to an outcome, to a goal. And if you can't, then you have to really think about why are we doing this activity? Yeah. And so I see Dawn's question. Yeah, when you ask where to start, top down or bottom up, is it easiest just to brainstorm by putting ideas on sticky notes or whiteboard or chalkboard? For me, it is because you can have, I've done it the physical post-it note way, and I've also done it projected onto a screen in an Excel document. So someone has the Excel and they're playing with it as we talk. But for me, the post-it notes was better in a way because you could physically move it with the group and everyone could participate at the same time. While if you have it on a computer, one person's driving and you just have a lot of people talking to them to try to change lots of things, which could work. It depends on how many people in the room, how your organization is already pre-organized, and a lot of factors. So I've done it both ways, but I'm a self-proposed lover of log frames, color-coded spreadsheets, and post-it notes. Just that's my general life. Yeah, every Christmas I get a giant pack of post-it notes, and that's just because Santa knows that needs to happen, because that's my life. I go through them. So I like post-it notes, but that's a personal decision. But you can do it on a whiteboard too, and draw things, write things, rewrite things, erase. But for me, it's more of a creative process when you have something that multiple people can work on at the same time. So I probably have a preference for post-its.
So Sarah, I know that there are some resources we want to share with the attendees, but there's another question I wanted to put out there if we have time. What is the difference between, say, a theory of change concept, because you hear that often, especially in the area of measurement, right? So what's the theory of change? And then how does that play into sort of the logical framework that the log frames in which we've talked about today? Is there a connection between those pieces where you have this theory of change, and then you have the log frames the activities that you're tracking? I don't know. It seems to me that there's a connection.
They are similar.
Okay.
So a theory of change is also looking at the process of how you achieve your goal. Right. But for more of a broader perspective, in my opinion. So it's more taking the outputs or even the outcomes and really saying how those contribute little by little to the change. So really, they think of the goal, if you imagine it as a puzzle piece, like the goal is as a puzzle, a blank puzzle. This outcome does this piece, this outcome does this piece, and this outcome does another. And it's really saying, okay, to create this big change, we need to do all these things. But it's more of an overarching. A log frame is more specific with activities, and then again, indicators and risks. So it's more of a implementer's document, while a theory of change is more of a strategic document, I would say. So, okay, I also see a question from Renato. En el mercado de las actividades podrías incluir los materiales y recursos a utilizar en dicha actividad que sea un paso siguiente. Yes, entonces sí, en el marco de las actividades puedes incluir, necesitamos esto, pero también parte de esto puede ser los riesgos. Por ejemplo, si no tenemos luz por una semana, no podemos imprimir los paquetes. ¿Qué hacemos? Cosas así. Pero sí, debes incluir los materiales, todo esto. Y cuando incluyes otros aspectos, por ejemplo, lo de finanzas, todo esto, es importante para incluir qué son los materiales y recursos necesarios. So, in English, sorry, I'm going to repeat this. Renato asked, in the framework, in the section of activities, should we include materials and resources? Or what would be the next step? And I said, yes. You can include those, and they should be maybe not so specifically, but also risks are associated with materials and resources. So for example, if you don't have electricity for a week, how are you going to print reading packets? Or if you don't have enough teachers, things like that should be included in the risks as well. But in your materials, that's necessary to also think you connect with other product or program areas such as finances. Okay, this is something we need to include and think about because maybe we don't have the finances to do this in this moment. So yes, you should, and that can also, again, I gave you the most basic of all basic log frames. You can expand it. You can add more columns if your organization needs it. I have seen log frames that have a column for resources that you then list all of your resources for your activities and then say, do we have enough finance? Do we have enough resources, energy, time, things like that? So yes. And then.
So Sarah, I know we're reaching our time together,
Yes.
but I want to make sure that we have the ability to highlight some of those important resources that you built into your
because someone did
presentation.
ask about that in the chat. Yes.
Okay, so
Can you go to the next slide then?
you got it.
So I've provided a couple of resources. If you go all the way to the bottom, it's The Guardian. It is a very basic explanation of log frame. It's actually where I got the example we did today was from that article. So it's a very simple explanation. I've also included the USAID project design guidance PDF. It's a large document, but it does give a lot of pointers on how to do project design, and some aspects touch on theories of change, log frames, things like that. The United Nations Development Program also has one on planning, monitoring, and evaluation, which I think is important. The CRS guide on developing theories of change. Again, theories of change and log frames are somewhat similar in many ways, but I find that CRS in general has some really great resources for program design and development. And for those who need it in different languages, the CRS documents, I think, come in like 17 languages. So in general, they have a whole library on their website as well of different documents you can use. But yes, and those are all free resources as well.
Great. Well, Sarah, thank you very much for your time, your expertise. I always say when you have sessions like this where you reach that point where you're running out of time, that means it's really good information, really good insight. And thank you for your willingness to share it with us and our affiliates all around the world. I would encourage you, all of you, to tap into those resources when you're looking at tackling this particular journey of developing log frames. And again, Sarah, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Great.
No,
and just as a quick commercial to close things out, we have our upcoming webcast on program measurement and evaluation. So look at that. We talked about design and implementation using log frames, but going to that next step of how do you measure your programs. And so that webcast is coming up in, I believe, April. And then others to follow in integrating arts into your program, and then a series on fundraising and more. And then don't forget the Global Recognition Program that we launched at the annual conference. You'll be seeing more information regarding that. So that ends my commercial and our time together. Sarah, thank you very much, and the team and all the attendees for taking time out of your day, wherever you are in the world, to be with us on this month's webcast. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening, afternoon, and night.
all right. Thanks you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're very welcome.